Cari lettori di Psicologia contemporanea, oggi sono orgoglioso di poter portare su questi schermi un personaggio storico della psicologia, un personaggio che ha lasciato proprio un segno importante all'interno della storia della nostra professione. Martin Seligman è stato presidente dell'American Psychological Association, ha scritto numerosi libri stupendi bestseller, tra i quali il mio preferito Imparare l'Ottimismo, e soprattutto è considerato da tutti il padre fondatore della psicologia positiva. Quando tutti i professionisti si chiedevano come mai le persone sono tristi, sono ansiose, sono paurose, lui si è domandato come fanno a essere felici, dando così il via a una vera e propria rivoluzione all'interno della psicologia. È di questo che ho parlato con lui, ma ho parlato anche di ottimismo, come trasmetterlo ai nostri figli, come svilupparlo e quali limiti porre, se porre, alle persone eccessivamente ottimiste. Vi lascio all'intervista che ho fatto a Martin Seligman, ad alcuni spezzoni di questa intervista, e ci vediamo dopo per un ultimo saluto. Why did you decide to dedicate a significant part of your studies to the idea of optimism, when psychology used to be focused on sadness, anxiety, depression, mental disease?
Yes, I think only half of the human condition is about misery, and it's the half that psychologists, for very accidental reasons, I think having to do with American funding, and right after World War II, psychology became focused on, was the alleviation of wounds and misery. And psychology did pretty well, but it entirely omitted what makes life worth living. So there's a difference between getting rid of the barriers that cripple life, and if you got rid of all of them, then you get to zero, and building a life that's worth living. So it seemed to me, when I became president of the American Psychological Association, that research and practice should add to the alleviation of misery, the building of well-being, what is above zero, what makes life worth living for free, non-suffering people.
In the past, positive psychology was considered too simplistic, at least here in Italy. Many mental health professionals ignored it, and the personal growth experts, such as coaches and trainers, used it. How can psychologists and mental health professionals take back this area and offer something more valuable?
Yes, well, positive psychology has been, for me, based in scientific discovery. And so it's very different from armchair positive thinking. And there are a very large number of measurements of well-being and the building of well-being that have been subject to random assignment, placebo-controlled tests. So positive psychology has the same epistemological status as the psychology of depression or schizophrenia. So it's just, for me, an ordinary part of scientific psychology. Many messages for the therapist and for the coach. You can measure the well-being of your clients. You can measure how much positive emotion or absence they have. You can measure how much meaning they have in life or absence. And then there are exercises for building positive emotion, engagement, good relationships, and meaning. So I don't know about the texture of the early critique of positive psychology as simplistic, but I suggest to you it was illiterate.
What is your first recommendation or your most important piece of advice for learning optimism?
Well, I think the most important simple piece comes directly from cognitive therapy, which is, in cognitive therapy, its essence is to first recognize the most pessimistic and catastrophic, unrealistic thoughts you say to yourself, and then with realistic evidence to dispute them. So this is the heart of positive psychology. It's different from cognitive therapy in the sense that you're not dealing with depressed people. You're dealing with normal people who also have the same catastrophic distortions about their future. So identifying what you think when it's unrealistic and then treating it as if it was said by an external person whose mission in life was to make you miserable and disputing it realistically.
Are there some specific or frequent thoughts, obstacles, or behaviors that prevent people from learning optimism?
Well, I don't think so. I think that what optimism does is it takes seriously the darkest thoughts you have, the unrealistic expectations of the future. It makes you more flexible and more realistic about evaluating evidence and using that to dispute them. So it's not as if depressive, pessimistic thoughts are the hindrance of optimism. Those are exactly what you want to recognize and work on.
Is it always good to be optimistic, or sometimes do we risk being too simplistic or irrational?
Well, I think that would be a caricature of optimism. I think the point of optimism is to be realistic about the future. And just one example, people think of 2016 as a troubled time, and they worry about the future. And people often think, it's a catastrophe, the world is going under. But realistic evidence is, if you look at the envelope over the last 200 years, you look at malnutrition. 95% of people were malnourished 200 years ago. Now 12% of the world is. 200 years ago, 10% of the world could read and write. Now 90% of the world can read and write. If you go through every objective statistic, then you argue against the notion that this is a particularly troubled time. And that leads to, I think, a realistic optimism and hope about the future.
What can parents do to teach optimism to their children from the beginning?
Well, I've become quite serious about secure attachment and about the notion of home. So when we look at people who are predisposed to depression and pessimism, I think the early analytic people had something to say about that. The Tavistock people, that there was a disrupted sense of home, a disrupted sense of attachment. So for me, the nuclear family, a family that's loving, a family that does things together, is at least as important as the psychological environment. So indeed, you can teach children optimism by teaching them early on to recognize the good things that happen and why they happened. And one can use the cognitive skills. But we must not overlook the notion of secure marriages, of home, of extended families.
Poter parlare con Martin Seligman per me è stata veramente una grande emozione, un po' perché il suo libro Imparare l'ottimismo ha veramente segnato molto la mia visione, modo di rapportarmi con la psicologia, un po' perché, devo dire, questo personaggio, come anche molti altri miti, sacri miti della psicologia, si è dimostrato veramente molto accessibile, molto disponibile, molto genuino, e questa cosa mi ha colpito molto. A camere spente ci siamo fermati oltre mezz'ora a parlare, mi ha raccontato del nuovo libro che sta scrivendo, una sua autobiografia, gli ho raccontato dei progetti che sto portando avanti, e mi ha confessato che il giorno prima della nostra chiacchierata stava passeggiando nel Parco Sempione e ha incontrato un edificio con fuori scritto Casa della Psicologia, e il caso vuole che questo edificio è proprio uno dei progetti che ho costruito insieme agli altri colleghi dell'Ordine di Psicologi della Lombardia. Mi ha detto che l'idea di fare una Casa della Psicologia gli piaceva moltissimo. Entrando in Casa della Psicologia, se avete voglia di venirci a trovare in Piazza Castello a Milano, si vedono una serie di fotografie dei grandi personaggi che hanno fatto la storia della nostra professione, e Martin Seligman mi ha detto che anche lui ci teneva a far comparire il suo volto tra quello di questi grandi. persona disponibile, simpatica, molto piacevole, spero che si siano riusciti a cogliere alcuni di questi aspetti anche a telecamere accese. Vi rimando a registrarvi gratuitamente nell'area riservata del sito psicologiacontemporanea.it per poter accedere all'intervista integrale. Anche per oggi è tutto, grazie e a presto.